Today I'm going to have a quick look at the Cooler Master HAF X, and I'll make some notes, but it's going to be hopefully pretty brisk, but I do want to cover all, sort of all the things that I had in mind about it. So I've got it here, and this is our HAF X. This is the one I built the X79 system in, and so we've had it for a year or so, and I don't use it on a daily basis, but I do see it on a daily basis. So I'm gonna make a bunch of notes about it, and then I will cover each point hopefully fairly briskly. The front of the case, I like it quite a bit. The Cooler Master aesthetic, I'm not going to talk about aesthetics that much because that's just, it's subjective. And if you're buying the case, or if you're buying any case, you're either going to like it or you're not, and you're choosing to buy it, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. Although I will say this Cooler Master aesthetic has grown on me a little bit. The front is plastic, and it's rigid plastic, but it kind of looks pretty good. The only thing I will mention about it though is that all of these edges here, they've got a groove in the middle and edges. There's lots of edges along here, so once they get dusty, you've got to kind of, clean in all of these spaces versus a sort of a more flat design where you just give the whole thing a quick wipe. So it's a little bit more complicated to clean it after it's been sitting around for a while. The front does feel very durable. I don't get the feeling that plastic is ever going to crack easily or have any sort of damage to it easily done, sort of dropping it or something. As far as marks and stuff, it's pretty good. I mean, dust is going to settle on anything, but finger marks, not too much. You don't get much finger marks on it. Scuffs and stuff, not too much, so it's pretty good. It's pretty durable surface as far as all that sort of thing. The front fan area, everywhere has the fine mesh filter sort of thing, which is pretty good because it will stop all of the, if you've got a negative air pressure, it'll stop mesh. The mesh will stop any sort of dust from accumulating and coming into the cracks. So that's pretty good, but all of the filters, you can actually take them out yourself and just remove. The filters are actually gone on this case. I guess they have been removed at some point. I will show you the one in the front though. You just pull it out, and it's just fine like this. So it's not the foam stuff or anything. I really do like when they add fine foam. I think that looks really nice. This stuff is fine as well. The front, as you've probably seen, or maybe not, the front has a 200mm, and it's not one of those crappy, thin, low profile 20mm ones. This is actually a 30mm, so a nice substantial fan at the front, and you get the same around the side and everywhere else. I'll cover that later. You get 140 and 120 holes here, so if you do mount a fan there, there's going to be some gaps around the edge. What I would have preferred to have seen is less opticals, so this is the same sort of thing we saw in the HAF 932, which is much older. This is an older case too now. I'd like to see less opticals and more fans at the front. So they've done this already with stuff like the Striker, where you can add more fans along the front 120s, and that's what I like. But this older design, you're pretty much you're confined to a single 120, a single 140, or the single 200 that you get with the case, which is fine. It's because the 200 is pretty good, and it still does move a lot of air. So definitely no issues. But there's just no need for 5 optical bays at this point. 3 or 2. 2 for a large case. 2 is probably a little bit, not as much as you would want, because if you want to have a dual bay res or something like that, and then something else, it's a big case. But the way they did it in the Striker is pretty good because you get optical covers all the way down, and then you can sort of fit in whatever you want. The front panel area is pretty good. It's got standard stuff, so an e-serralite, which is a little dated at this point, as well as Firewire, which is dated, but we do still see Firewire on cases for whatever reason. You know, standard headphones. USB 2s are stacked on top of each other, and then USB 3s are beside each other. With the USBs, they're always like this, but basically if you have the fat drives, you know, you're not going to be able to fit two fat drives together either way, so you won't. Well, actually, see, you can do it. This is obviously a really bulky drive, and you can fit the really bulky drive as well as the medium bulky drive on top of each other in these USB 2.0 ports here, but you can't do it. You can only fit one or the other in this USB 3 area here. So it probably would have been better for the USB 3s to be stacked on top of each other the same way the 2s are. As far as other stuff, the power button and stuff, there's a little slider that goes on top, and you can slide it over and cover these. The power button's pretty good. It has a click to it. I mean, it's nothing fancy, but at least it does. You can actually press it, and there's a tactile click. The reset and fan here, they're the same size, and they're labeled. There's a label on them, but if you're in a dark room or something, these are pretty close, and they're the same size and everything. So if you're trying to hit your fan LED, you might hit reset by accident. So I think the reset button could have been sort of moved over somewhere else so that it's not going to be confused with the fan button. Other than that, it's fine. Same quality, same materials, plastic. Pretty good quality plastic actually. Along the top, I'm just going to mention again really quick, all of these, the design here with all of these little nubs sticking out. When you're going to clean it, you need to clean inside of each of these individual bits. And you've got to get the corner of the rag, or you've got to get the Q-tip right in the corner there. And so it sort of creates a bunch of extra areas that you need to clean. So whether you like the look of it or not, it's just something. I've never actually had to clean one of these before, and I'm just noticing now that it's actually a bit of a pain in the butt to clean. It actually reminds me of cleaning bike forks, and you've got to go in between each individual spoke and clean there. So it kind of is a pain to clean it. When I first saw this roof area, I thought this little sections of mesh would probably be a little bit flimsy, but probably due to the way this design is and how it's split into two sections, when you press down on this mesh, there's actually not much flex in it at all. It's pretty rigid, which is nice and surprising. So this is sort of average metal mesh, or probably aluminum mesh maybe, and it's got the couple millimeter size holes in it. It's got inlays of mesh for both of these that you can put in. These are exhausts, so you can take them out if you want. They are out in this case. If the fans were smaller than the holes, like they are on the 650, I'd probably leave the mesh in just so it would prevent any sort of dust from getting sucked in around the edges of the fans. But in this case, it comes with one fan in the roof, so one at the back, I believe, and then there's mesh. So if it was like that, I'd leave it, at least leave the mesh in the front one so that dust doesn't get sucked in through there. You can also add a second, you can add a second 30mm fan. One comes in the top here, and you can add a second one in the front. And in that case, the fan it's a 200mm, so it does cover this whole area, and so there's not going to be any open mesh in that case. So you might want to remove it then. As far as radiators and stuff, I'm not going to talk about water cooling either, because that's just not something I'm familiar with. I'm not going to talk about stuff that I'm not familiar with. So all I know is that you can put a 30 millimeter fan in the top, and you can put radiators in there too. I assume at least a 30 millimeter radiator. One other thing that I noticed that was a little different than the HAF 932. If you remember the HAF 932 at all, it had sort of a two 120 millimeter fan space back here in the back 3/4 or so, and you could add two 140s or two 120s there. But then there was a section here at the front where that tray at the top was, where you could, the tray with the rubber mat, you could put some things in. But that covered up, probably a quarter of the front area. So what they've done here, and then what they've done here is made this whole area open. So you can add, up to three 140 fans, or three 120s, sorry, I believe. And it's more open. So it's open all the way to here, which is, I think it's like 80% open. So what they've done here is added more airflow in the roof area over the 932. The 932 had, you could actually mount three 120 millimeter fans, but one of them was halfway covered by that tray area, and what they actually did there was, in the steel frame there was some holes, and then in the back of that tray there was a little exhaust slot at the back of that tray, so you could kind of, some of the air from that fan could pass out through there, but it wasn't very open. So it's a lot more open here, and like I said, it's pretty sturdy as well, so pretty good up at the top. Around the side, they continue the theme of high airflow. Unfortunately, this is not really my personal taste. They've got another 200 millimeter here, as you can see, so this whole mesh section sort of blocks your view of the video cards, and it blows on the video cards, which is something that I'm not a big fan of personally. There's kind of a window. It shows some of the CPU here up top, but you can see there's still a lot of space at the top here and in the corner, so it's a bit of a small window. And then there's this section all along here, which shows basically, it shows at least half, if not 60% drive, and then just the ends of the video card. So the way the window's positioned is not my favorite, but that's just how it is. Airflow, I'm sure it's good for airflow, but I don't really think that you need a fan at the side, so this is not my favorite. There are a couple of front access hard drive trays, but I wouldn't call them a hot swap or anything because they're not that quick. But basically this case only has the one because it has a light thing behind here. But basically this is these two bottom ones in the stock case, you'd slide them out, and then this is a tray that has holes for a 2.5 or a 3.5. So you can put drives in here, and it's more of a permanent thing, like a server rack style. It reminds me of a server case a little bit. You screw your drive in with 4 screws, so that's why it's not that quick. And then you can slide the drives in, and there's a serial HA PCB at the back there. So you can have 2 of those, and those are good if you want a more permanent long-term thing. But it's definitely not as quick as just sliding it into the top and having a drive hang out at the top or something like that. At the bottom there's some more changes from the 932, but in this case not necessarily for the better, and this may actually impede the airflow a little bit rather than open it up. So with the 932 it had feet, 4 feet, those round ones, and then the rest of the bottom was all open. So the feet would lift the case at least an inch off the ground, and then the rest was all open. So if you're having your fan at the bottom or power supply fan at the bottom, it could intake from anywhere. But with this design, you can see they have a rail that goes all along the bottom on both sides, and it's only really open at the back. So your power supply or your fan is probably only going to be able to intake from the back. There's a little tiny bit of grooves along here, but not much air is going to come from there. So one of those things realistically not going to make much difference, but they did, sort of close that up more than the 932, so that in theory should actually restrict airflow a little bit over the 932. The side panel's a little different from the 932 as well, and I'd say an improvement, because I never liked the big HAF graphic that was slapped on the side of the 932. That always was a little bit tacky to me. I never liked it. Thankfully these doors don't have that. They're just plain. There's along the edge here, but 3 inches in or so, it's raised out, and then here where the fan is on the other side, it's raised out again. Each of them is raised maybe 6 or 8 millimeters out. The door itself is nice and rigid, thick door, very nice. This is a mess behind here. This is the older style Cooler Master back panel, so you can see with the CPU cutout, it blocks half of the CPU. It was pretty small actually, and it blocked it on a couple of other platforms as well. So a pretty poor CPU cutout design, but on their newer Cooler Master cases it's much bigger, and so they fixed that. So that's just something that they did with the older cases. The HAF 932 is the same. The loops are nice and big. The cable management loops are large, unlike some other loops where you can hardly get a zip tie through them. These are no problem. You can get zip ties through them easily. You can see some of the grommets are kind of pulling out, so they're not the most secure grommets ever, but that's pretty common with grommets. They're not bad. I'd say they're good. There's decent amount of cable loops. Again, the hard drive thing, there's 5 hard drives in a huge case like this, and then there's, I think, at least 5 optical pairs. I definitely would like to see more than 5 hard drives in a case this large. But again, other Cooler Master cases like the Cosmos 2 have also addressed that problem. And I'm not sure how many the Striker has, but I think they've sort of addressed that problem with some of the newer models of cases. So back panel is fine. There's a decent amount of space. Like I said, the panel is multi-level, so you get extra space in that way. I'll take you around the other side and show you some of the things about that side. I'll show you the back of the case really quick. It's fairly standard. With the power supply, there's holes for mounting the power supply both ways, which is good. One thing to note, not about the case, but just about the Enermax Platimax power supply. Some of the older power supplies, the sticker on the back would be right side up when the fan was facing down, so intaking through the bottom, like the cases, the cases that have the bottom mounted power supply want you to do. But with this one, I've got it that way. I've got the fan mounted down. It's intaking through the bottom, but you'll notice the sticker is actually upside down. So in order to get that sticker right side up, you'd have to have the power supply facing with the fan up, which is the way I like to do it because it looks better that way. So it's kind of nice to see Enermax is sort of heading in that direction, sort of giving you some hints that they kind of want you to have the power supply facing with the fan up, and they're going to flip the sticker around so that it sort of implies that. This stuff, there's some passive ventilation mesh for graphics cards here, which is pretty nice because that just lets some of the air from the graphics cards flow out. Pretty standard stuff. The slots, there's 9 slots. The slot covers have the ventilation mesh in them as well. At the back you have a fan, 140, comes with 140, and there's holes for a 120 as well. There's 3 water cooling grommets at the top there. The doors are just standard groove in the front, and then you screw the 2 screws in the back, which is sort of a pain to get on and off. But the upside of that is you don't get any big bulky clips like on the Corsair 600T and 650. So that's the back. There's not much to it. It's just it's a fairly standard layout, and it's good. There's no complaints about the back. Those 3 vertical grooves, if you saw those and you were wondering, I believe those are for, the case comes with a bracket to support the graphics cards, and I believe you put that in there and it sort of slides up and down vertically to get the right height, and then you can kind of lock that in and support graphics cards. Personally, I wouldn't use that just because of the looks, and I haven't found any recent graphics cards have had a problem with sagging, but some of the I have seen a couple of those Asus 3-slot ones sagging quite a bit, so maybe in a case like that it might be good. There's also a duct. It comes with a big air duct here, and I've also seen the NVIDIA edition, it came with a fan. But from what I saw, it was, it stuck out way over to sort of here, I think. And so with the cables and stuff, with these cables, they're pretty bulky and stiff. It would be hard to get that mounted in properly. So that came on our case, that came straight out as well, right at the beginning. There's also, you've probably seen it, a big cover thing that covers the power supply cable area. That's one of those things that's okay as well. I mean, in this case, I might actually throw it on because these Platimax cables are really not sleeved very well. So there's a lot of yellow showing on the ends. But yeah, you can cover up this whole area here. At the bottom here for the power supply, there's a filter, but it's one of those ones, the mesh filter section just has a couple tabs, one tab on each corner, and then that tab just slits into a groove in the case. I find those are really easy to just sort of, if you knock them, they can just kind of pop out and fall out and come loose. So I'm not a huge fan of that. I'd rather just see one of those ones that's has a plastic frame and you slide it into a track on the bottom of the case, and that way you can also get it out while the case is closed and running even. This way you have to open the side door to get it, and then it's sort of under the power supply, so you've got to kind of, the power supply's in there right now and you can't really even get it out. So this is one of those things, in order to be able to clean the dust filter out while the power supply is running, if you've got it face down that way, it's sort of better to have that plastic frame design that slides out along the bottom. A couple things regarding the hard drive and optical bay area. First of all, the optical bays come with, they're not on there, but they come with the first four have quick release, but then those 2 slots at the bottom right here where the hot swap bay or front access bay is, there's no quick clips on there, so it kind of doesn't look symmetrical. There's 4 and then 2 missing, so then I've just went and removed them all so that it matches, but then you see there's all those little clip things for the front quick release clips to go into, and then that kind of looks busy and messy. I know quick release clips are kind of the thing, but what I'd rather see is just a series of symmetrical horizontal grooves for screws, like we've seen on some cases. I can't remember the model right now, but you can just screw it in and they're horizontal grooves, so you can slide it forward and backwards as much as you need. And then that way, when you've got a full bay and there's no drives in there at all, or just one or whatever, it's very clean looking, unlike this where once you've pulled them all out, it's really busy and kind of messy looking. And then coming down along the bottom here, like I said, there's only 5 hard drives, which is, 5's not terrible, but it's not great. These Cooler Master quick release for the hard drives, I've never been a huge fan of them. I've always found that the the little tab here that goes into the drive screw hole easily pops out of the grommet as you're trying to get them in, and so it's kind of a pain to get the drive in. And then also on the HAF X, the 932, these little nubs went into the drive screw hole pretty good. But on the HAF X, it seemed like they were a little bit bigger or something, so it was actually really hard to get those little nubs into the drive screw hole. It was, you had to press it really hard, and it was hard to do it. Also, you can see there's one in there. The 932, the actual trays themselves don't have a hole for 2.5mm SSDs or drives. So what they do is they give you one of these little adapters. So each case only comes with one adapter, so as it is stock, you can only run one SSD or one 2.5mm drive. I think that they, this was prior to the tray redesign where they added the holes for 2.5s, so you could run 2.5s in every drive, in every tray rather. But I think that they could have, at least give you two. It wouldn't have hurt them to give you at least two. This one I only got because a guy at the computer store had a spare one in his bin of parts, and he gave it to me. But with the case, it only comes with one per case. As far as the way everything fits in, I mean, like I said, these are 30mm fans at the front, and there's still at least 5-6mm with this little edge thing, and then probably 10 or 12mm to the actual side of the cage. And I think that's the way it should be in a large case. There's plenty of space in a large case. There's no need to have the hard drive cage slapped right up against the fan with almost no extra space, because there's loads of space in the case. You can see this is a Platinum 1200 watt. So that's the longer 180mm, I believe, but don't take my word for it. Look it up yourself. But it's a 1200 watt. It's the longer than the average. And you can see there's tons of space there between the cage and the power supply. These are two 580s in there, as well as a Zonar Essence in the middle. And you can see there's plenty of space there for a longer card. I believe those are 10.5 inches or something like that. One of the things that I'm a little bit fussy about, just because I'm, kind of really picky with cables, is these grommets. This is, the Rampage Extreme, so it's wider than I don't remember all the terminology for each board form factor, but it's wider than the standard ATX, so it's a wide board. And you see, even with this wide board, the grommet here is, almost an inch away from the edge of the board. So if you had a normal one, it'll be probably 2 inches away from the edge of the board, and that way you, instead of being able to go with the cable straight out the back with no gap, you have to sort of take the cable and travel, a couple inches over to the side and then go out. One thing about the 650D is it does have two sets of grommets, so it has a set of grommets that's closer to the front of the case, and you can use those for the wider boards or whatever you have, optical drives or whatever. And then it has a set of grommets that's right at the edge where a normal ATX board would be, so you can go straight out with those. That's the way I like to see it. This case, I believe it only has the set of grommets that's sort of closer to the front, so further away from the edge of the board. You can see this is a H100 at the top here, with a set of 25mm standard 120 fans on there, and there's plenty of space between the board, the top of the board, and like I mentioned, you can fit 30mm fans on the top, sort of in the roof area. So as far as space on top of the motherboard, there's plenty of space. I believe there's a couple cutouts along the top for your motherboard power. So with a motherboard like this, where the power's kind of in the center, you can go straight up and out. But some other cases have only the one in the corner towards the back. So this has a good set of grommets for the front, for the power at the top, and fans at the top, or whatever you have at the top. One thing you may have noticed before is that the bottom grommet here, it's very large, so that's good. But one thing about it, it doesn't have a grommet, which is, I think it's actually fine, because on some other cases where there is a grommet right next to the power supply there, if you're not being super careful and only using some, and if you're using more cables, once you get a ton of cables through, it becomes fairly easy to kind of pop the grommet out by accident. So what they've done here is they've just skipped the grommet and left a big wide open hole here for you to run all your power supply cables out. No matter how many cables you have coming out of the power supply, there's not going to be any problem. As you can see, I've got a good portion of the Platimax cables, and there's a couple inches on the one side open and an inch or so on the other side, so no trouble there, so that's good. One thing there isn't, though, you can see the bottom of the board. This is the standard ATX height. You can see the bottom of the board. There's no grommet along the bottom, like the 650D has a grommet at the bottom for a normal ATX height board, and then it has a grommet higher up for an MATX board, or mini ITX board, or whatever. This one, it doesn't really have any grommets along the bottom to accommodate a normal ATX height board. So any cables that you've got, if you've got an ATX board like this, any cables you've got, you don't really have anywhere to run them other than all the way down to that same grommet that the power supply cables use. One other note about the hard drive cage is that in addition to only being 5 drives, unlike some of the newer cases that are much smaller, it's also not, you can't break it up in any way. Like with the Fractal, I think you have like 4 and 3 and 2, or 4 and 3, and then with the 650D you've got 3 and 3, and you can kind of take one section out and mix and match with the sections. This is just all one section, and it's not removable at all, so it's just riveted in. Same with the optical drives, all of those are just riveted in. So it's not really flexible with the hard drive cage and the optical drive area, unless you start drilling out the rivets and modding it yourself. So that's a quick look at the Cooler Master HAF X, which is an older case at this point. You can see that it sort of lacks in some flexibility areas and some of the modern features that cases have, like built-in SSD 2.5, mounting holes and things like that, but it's in flexible hard drive cage areas. But the functionality is strong, the airflow is excellent, and there's workarounds like the 2.5 to 3.5 adapters and all that sort of thing. So I would say it's in between good and excellent. It's a very good case, and I would recommend it. And it also fits the larger form factor motherboard. So if you've got a larger form factor motherboard, this is I'd say this is still a solid choice. And I would recommend the Cooler Master HAF X to anyone who's looking for a large, high airflow case.